So welcome to another video of quality reptiles, and in this video I'm gonna talk about basic tegu care. Most people want to start with a baby tegu, so that's also what I'm gonna start with in this video. Here you see a small enclosure. This would be perfect for a baby tegu for at least the first 8 months. After that, they grow really big, and they can already go in a full-size enclosure. This enclosure is 120 wide and 70 centimeters deep and 60 centimeters high. You need at least 60 centimeters high if you want to use an HID UV light like I have here. More about UV light later on in the video. When you start with a baby tegu, the most important question is where do you gonna get a baby tegu? In Europe, there's not a lot of choice because there are barely any breeders. I think I'm the only one in Europe that breeds every year. But there are some hobby breeders who have sometimes a clutch. So there are some breeders in Europe, but it's really small, and so there's not much choice. Most of the tegus, I think more than half of the tegus in Europe is wild caught. The other half is probably coming from me, and a very small part is from small hobby breeders. So yeah, not much choice here. In the USA it's much different. I think it's harder to get a wild caught than a captive bred. There are many breeders in the USA. Of course, because of the new rules, Florida had to lose a lot of breeders. So I think most of the tegu breeders were in Florida. So there are probably a lot less breeders now, but still there are a lot of breeders like Yes's Jungle and Rose City Reptiles, Laura Roberts, and a lot more breeders. I always recommend to buy with a breeder because they had much more attention for the animal from the day they are born. Often they are already a little bit tame when you buy them, and they are much more healthy than a wild caught. I personally am against wild caught for hobby keepers because they are really hard 9 out of 10 times. Sometimes you're lucky, but most wild caught tegus are really problem tegus, and me as a breeder, I would lie if I've never bought a wild caught. I think most of the animals that are breeders with me for many years are wild caughts, but I can tell that they are much more difficult than a captive bred. In personality, but also in care and in health. They have a lot more health problems. One of the common health problems with wild caughts is kidney failure. That's a really big problem. Because they are imported from Argentina. They often have been in sheds for a really long time in the dark without UV light, and they had not enough water, especially when they are shipped this way. They are for some days in boxes in a big box, traveling with the plane, and then they come here, and it often takes a while before they get water, and especially a baby tegu needs to drink a lot of water. So often in these early years, they already get kidney failure or damaged kidneys. And later on, you will notice that when they are a little bit older, then you go to a vet and you do some blood work and you find out that their kidneys are damaged. They can still get very old with damaged kidneys, but they do have a shorter life than they could have had. Um, Also, a big problem with wild caught is they often have parasites, and an importer should check them and make sure that they are parasite free, to give them medicine before they sell them, but it barely ever happens with them. Um, so that's very important when you buy a wild caught. If you even going to buy a wild caught, I do not recommend it. But if you buy one, you always have to go to a vet and check for parasites. And if they have parasites, then you have to treat them for the parasite. And if you treat them for parasites, it's not always 100% sure that the parasites are gone. So always check again if the parasites are really gone. Yeah, that's really important. Also, a big problem with wild-caught tegus is they are very, very scared. Often they are already a little bit bigger than when they have been born, and it's hard to uh, tame down a baby tegu that had a really bad start. It's much more easy if they are hatching and you already let them get used to to people to tame them down later. So that's also a problem that you have with wild caught. A problem also in Europe is that when people started to notice that there are wild caughts and captive breds, the sellers of the wild caughts started to tell people that they are captive bred, and they are not. They are from Argentina, and yes, some are born on that farm, and some are caught in the wild. But even the ones that are born at the farm, they still have the same problems that wild caughts have. Uh, so it's still a problem animal, and too many of the animals that are imported from the wild are dying, and it's animal abuse in my opinion. The only reason why there should be some animals from farms or wild caught is to keep the genes well and healthy. I'm not sure if that's needed with tegus because there are so many bloodlines, but that would be the only reason to import some tegus, but not 400 a year like it's happening now. That's way too much, and most of them die, and it's horrible. So please don't work with these people. Don't give them money for their work, because they will keep importing those wild caughts, and it's not good for our hobby, it's not good for the animals. So that's something that I wanted to say, at least. And of course, it's your own choice if you buy a captive bred or a wild caught. But wild caughts in tegus, it's not necessary anymore. There are too many captive breds. So like you can see behind me, I have an enclosure with soil. So it's a mixture of peat and cocos, and there's also some minerals in it to protect the stomach. It's my own brand, quality soil. You cannot get it everywhere in the world, only in the Netherlands and Belgium. But yeah, there are other options. What is very important is that it is not dusty, and there are no big parts in it, because big wood parts or something, they sometimes ingest, and it can cause an infection, and a lot of tegus die of infection. It's a really big problem with tegus. So make sure that it is better digestible, because every tegu will eat some substrate sooner or later. So that's a very important thing. I have a cork tree in here. It's hollow, so a tegu can go inside. But when you start with a baby tegu and he's still very scared and skittish, I recommend to have no hides in the enclosure, because hides will only make them more skittish and more afraid, and it will only work against you. Tegus, of course, need to drink. For baby tegus, I always have a small water bowl like this, and it's not deep. It's very small water bowl. But I do this because the very small baby tegus, they can drown in their water bowl. So you do not want them to fully submerge in the water. So that's why I use the small water bowls, and when they get bigger water bowls, and when they are older they can swim much better, but it's depending on every tegu. Some can swim really well and some don't, so always stay with them if you have them in a big pool or something, because not all tegus swim very well. So now we are in my shop, and I'm gonna tell you something about UV light and hotspots and everything. Here are some brands that I'm working with. You have Solar Raptor, Mega Ray, Reptech, and Arcadia. And my most favorite brands, and the only brands that I'm working with in the breeding facility, are Arcadia and Solar Raptor. And Solar Raptor I mostly use for my tegus, and Arcadia I use for my croc monitors. The reason why I use Arcadia for my croc monitors is because I was building a new enclosure, so I had the possibility to do it all over and new. And also my croc monitors are really long, big bodies, so I want to fully cover their bodies with UV. So Arcadia is much better for that. Or I could, of course, put more Solar Raptors on a row, but I just wanted to try it out, and it's working really well for them. But for my tegus, I use Solar Raptor 70-watt spot for the small enclosures and for the big enclosures. This just has to do with the distance and also the temperature that the hotspot needs to be, and they are just perfect for both this big and the small enclosure. But if you would use another brand, Mega Ray is still a very good brand. You can also use the 70 watts. And here you have the Reptech, and the same story, 70 watt is really good. I'm not a fan of the Mercury fiber bulbs. We have them in Reptech, but also in Mega Ray, and in Solar Raptor. I have them down here. And Reptech is a brand that is only available in the Netherlands and some parts of Europe, but not in the USA. Mega Ray is in the USA, but only the Mercury fiber bulbs, not the HID bulbs, who are, in my opinion, much better than the Mercury fiber bulbs. And with Solar Raptor, I'm not sure. I think they are not in the USA, but they are, in my opinion, the best brand in HID and Mercury fiber bulbs. So here you can see the difference between a metal halide lamp and an HID lamp. And like you can see, the HID lamp has a metal top with a glass bottom. This is where the UV and heat comes through. And the metal halide lamp is fully glass. And what is the problem with the metal halide lamps? The heat will come out from the side and from under, so from all sides. So your full enclosure will be heated from by this bulb, so all the heat will go through the whole enclosure, while this lamp will only have heat coming out from the underside. So all the heat will come together as a bundle down to the animal, what makes it a much hotter hotspot. And tegus really need a very high hotspot. The temperature must be between 45 and 55 degrees. With a metal halide lamp, you will not reach that temperature very easy, because the heat will go all sides. So even though this is a 100 watt and this is a 70 watt, this one will have a hotter hotspot than this one. Of course, with the metal halide lamp, you can use a reflector that reflects all the heat and UV down to make it more hot under the hotspot. And also you can extra use flood lamps or spot lamps next to the UV bulb, so the temperature will rise. But my recommendation is use one of the HID lamps if you can, because in the US they don't have them. So the HID lamps, they need a starter. Some people really don't like it, but it's not a big deal. This starter makes sure that the lamp goes on, so without it, it doesn't work. It's very easy. Some people think, oh, it's too difficult, but it's very easy. Every box has one that goes into the wall and one that goes into the bulb holder. So these things. And of course, you always need a stone one. Never use the plastic ones because they will melt. Then the Arcadias left, and they are really good UV bulbs too. Most people in the USA use them, and they are just, yeah, really good choice. The only problem is they do not give heat, so you need to have an extra heat source. For UV, I would use the 14%, because tegus need a lot of UV. Then you also need a hotspot, so you can use this one from no, you cannot use this one because they will not be hot enough, sorry. You can use the flood lamps, or the Philips incandescent lamps, par 38, sorry. And the halogen Arcadia, they are also fine. These are made for the Arcadia UV lamps, but they are very, very low in heat, so they don't work for hotspot. And these never use them as a hotspot. They are not made to be used as a hotspot. They are fine for overall heating, but they are not fine for a hotspot. These lamps cannot heat an animal to the core, and tegus will have very bad digestive problems if you use them. Oh, and never use a solar raptor or another HID or mercury fiber bulb in combination with the Arcadia T5, because you will get way too much UV, and it will burn them alive, and not in heat but in sunburn. So that's really horrible. If a tegu burns like that, it's very painful for them. And make sure that when you use a hotspot for them, it's near the UV, because if the hotspot is not near the UV and they do not get the UV and the heat at the same time, the vitamin D3 will be harder to absorb. So it needs to be very close to each other. So these bulbs do not work for tegus. They are fine for geckos or very small lizards, but for tegus or iguanas or monitor lizards, these are crap. Don't use them. It's a waste of money. They give barely any UV. And of course, you need an extra hotspot with these, and it's a complete waste of money. So don't use these. Never use these with tegus. So for overall heating, I recommend to use ceramic heaters, like one of these brands or another brand, doesn't matter. You also have Alstein, it's a very strong brand, but these are reptile brands. And you also need a thermostat. I personally would use a diming thermostat or the digital diming hobbystat, but that one is sold out at this moment with me. And you can also use an Evo or thermal control from Lucky Reptile. It doesn't really matter, it all works, but you need a thermostat. The thermostat will put the lamp on or off, or diming it, so it will be working more or less depending on how warm it is in the enclosure. And you need this because tegus need a night temperature above 23 Celsius degrees. If it gets too cold, they have problems eating, and they will have problems shedding. So the temperature always needs to be above 23 degrees Celsius, or even better, above 25 degrees. But under 23, you will get problems. And at daytime, it should be around 25 to 30 Celsius degrees. So here we are now at Beertje's enclosure. Beertje is a red tegu. Beertje, the name, it's a Dutch word for bear, so a teddy bear. And he is very, very friendly. So it looks really small, and it's very dark in the back on the video. In real time, the enclosure is much lighter, but somehow on camera it always is really dark. But this enclosure is 2 meters and 20 centimeters deep, and it's 120 wide. And 1 meter high, so it's a really big enclosure. Most people will do a wider enclosure and less deep, but for me in the breeding facility, it's much better to have them really deep, because also the females can lay their eggs in silence in the back, so that works really well for me. And like you can see here in the front, I have from stones to football holders, and in one of the footballs I put a bowl with water, and in the other bowl I can put food if they get food. and this way they cannot throw over their water bowl or their food bowl. And I also highed it a little bit, so it's much higher than the substrate, so they cannot fill up the food bowl and the water bowl with substrate, because that's really a hobby of tegus, to fill up their water bowl and food bowl, and you're digging them up every day, and it's a lot of work. And when you have like 50 tegus, you don't want to dig up food bowls and water bowls every day. So that's why I made this. And you can see one hotspot. It's like I talked about. I use the Solar Raptors, Spot 70 watt, and it works really well for me. I use them for over I think 18 years now, and I have a lot of very old tegus, so I think I do very well with them. Of course, there are always newer techniques and everything, and I'm always open for newer techniques, but till now I think maybe Arcadia is the only competing UV bulb in the world that and the other brands are really not better. And of course, natural sunlight always wins, but in the Netherlands it's always horrible weather. It's raining or it's raining, so yeah, it's hopeless to keep tegus outside here. They cannot live here outside. It's way too cold. Even summer is so unpredictable. We had a very hot spring, and now it's summer and it's only raining. So nothing to say about the weather in the Netherlands. I also think because in Europe overall it's hard to keep animals outside, or reptiles outside. So that's also why we have more UV brands in Europe. I think the need of UV lamps is much higher than in the USA, because I think the biggest part of people in the USA are keeping their reptiles outside, but it's really not possible here. Yeah, maybe in Spain or Italy it's possible to keep them outside for a very long time, but yeah, the hobby in those countries is not as big as other countries. So yeah, I think there are much more development in UV lights in Europe because of that. And of course, then we have food. And yeah, what do you feed a tegu? A baby tegu is obviously very small, so they cannot eat a very big prey. And they are mostly meat eaters. They can also eat a lot of fruit. There is some discussion if you need to feed more fruit than meat. Some tegus don't want to eat fruits. With my animals, it's very rare if they don't want to eat fruits, but I hear a lot of people that have problems feeding fruits to their tegus. I think most of the time it has to do with that they are just full, and if they have to choose between fruits or meat, then they always choose for meat. Because it's just more yummy for them, I think. But yeah, they obviously need both fruits and meat. I personally mix the fruits with the meat that I feed them. I feed meat from kiezenbrink. Kiezenbrink is a raw diet for dogs, and or meant for dogs, and they are also selling to zoos, and in zoos they also give it to wolves, I think. But it's really good food. It's a mix of bones, organs, and meat. I have dedicated a whole video about food, so I'm not gonna talk a lot about the food that you can give, but please watch that video and you know more about what I feed to my tegus and other animals. But yeah, a lot of people feed mice and chicks. I personally think if you only feed that, then they get really, really fat. And the meat that I give, it's much healthier for them, and you also can give a lot of variety because you have it in chicken and turkey, rabbit, hare, and many other tastes. So you can have a variety of food for them this way. And with mice and rat, it's always very fat food, and you get very big and chunky tegus. Of course, this is also a very big and chunky tegu, but he's still very skinny and agile. If you look at his back, he has a little belly, but he has no very big tail. And when the tail is very big and fat, then you know that you have a very, very fat tegu. A tegu, I always say, they do not need the McDonald's tail. The McDonald's tail is a tail that has very big fat reserves, and it gives an M on their back. And if they have this McDonald's, they are not healthy. So fat is not only on the belly, but it's also on the tail, mostly on the tail. And if it's too skinny, then the backbone will stick out. So then you know it's too skinny. And when it's flat, it could be more fat, but it's fine. And a breeding tegu especially, it's fine to be a little bit skinny, but not too skinny. A very fat tegu doesn't breed most of the time, so you don't want a very fat tegu. Next to that, it can give a lot of health problems. Tegus can die of being overweight, and it happens a lot. The fat in the belly will have so much pressure on their organs. It can cause them to the organs to turn, and then they cannot poop anymore, or it will crush organs, and they obviously die because of that. Some signs that you know that they have problems with their intestines is like when they are gonna lay on their back. Because the pressure on their belly, it hurts so much, they're gonna lay on their back and to relieve pressure, but it's very unhealthy for them to lay on their backs. So if you see that, you have to think about what's wrong. There's something, they have pain in their belly, and what is causing it? Is it because it's overweight, or is it because they have infection or parasites or anything in their intestines? So that's something to look for when they lay on their belly. With me, the babies also get bring meat mix daily, and some people give insects, but I think meat is much better for babies for growing. My adult tegus get food 2 times a week, and when the summer is over and they stop breeding, then I only give them 1 time a week, because otherwise they get way too fat. I of course look at every tegu personally. Some get less food and some get more food. It all depends on the animal itself. So thank you for watching this video. Please leave a message in the comments, and please like and subscribe. Let me know if you have any more questions about this topic, or if you want to suggest a new video that I should make.